It is a warmer evening than any other from within the recent weeks, but spring has not yet brought all its vivid colors. I'm trying to get my Blackberry back. It went missing with a morphine addict I made acquaintance with back in high school. He has been living with his mother in the same neighborhood where I live, and this made it an easy decision for me to exit my own mother's house while strolling embarked on trusting in the probability of finding it. I had also moved back to mother's house 9 months prior to this day after losing the cashier post I had been tasked to fulfilling daily at a men's clothing shop. The store traded in a small town near my grandma's village. I had stayed with grandma almost a couple of years there. My relocation to her house followed squatting at a friend's house during a period in which mother had kicked me out of the usual living space I'd kept in Rustenburg. That was actually the second time in which she had demanded that I leave her house. I made this departure on an evening in which alcohol had me ready to let my temper loose if fixed, and a stubborn skepticism as to it being my fault that the microwave oven was not working correctly dictated my response to the accusation with a fury. On this current evening, after realizing that the chances of me finding Flo, my junkie acquaintance, are somewhat minimal, I then decide on visiting Smokey. He's also a guy I've known from my high school days and been friends with since. His companionship is made much more worthwhile by the level of diligence he has done well to maintain throughout the years, even those following our graduation from Greenville High School. The last time I had paid Smokey a visit, I found him pacing in front of his yard holding a phone to his ear, trying to get himself back on good terms with the female voice on the other end of the line. Similar situations had become consistent in our respective lives. I arrived to find him in a much calmer demeanor on this Sunday. Our chat is of an idle sort. There's not much else to report on after he let me know that he is without the fees needed to let us partner up in diminishing a common thirst through the sedative contents held by beer bottles. Being bereft of such refreshment during this moment is consolidated by the slight buzz I had been carrying after having made a stop at the pub in my neighborhood before journeying to Smokey's place. The relief of the drink had me feeling as though mother's attempts at attrition had me at their helm. She has still seemed to desire witnessing hardship break the peace my mind settles in. My annoyance with this has on occasion had me missing the skateboard I had left on a minibus about 3 years ago in 2012. I had often used it when escaping to allow myself a time for relish and solitude. When I had left it on the vehicle, my focus was solely on making sure that I offboarded with a girl courteous enough to keep me mesmerized with fellatio during the ride back to Rustenburg. We were returning from a show held at the park in one of the communities near Sun City. On stage, I was impressive enough to be gifted all treats on offer from her. We had sex in the morning. I could do with some of that on this very night too, but even that sort of opportunity has its occurrence given less chance by the predicament of missing a cell phone. A month had gone by since Flo had disappeared with it. A few more days from this most recent afternoon of searching would pass before I bumped into him again. His desertion with it was brought about by my need to buy tickets for an annual hip-hop event scheduled to take place in town on the day we had last met. I was flat broke when he pitched the possibility of getting a loan through a connection of his. The misfortune of hearing him utter this luring garbage was brought about by an unexpected encounter on a busy street. Fun booked for that evening very soon coming turned me desperate. I allowed him to use my personal property in making a phone call relevant to business I thought would be provisional to my goal of being speedily financed. Sequentially to the phone call, we walked towards the bus terminals. That is where we were supposedly meant to meet up with the loaner. Flo had his girlfriend joining us on that day. He had notified me during our travel that he would be the one amongst us best suited for heading forth to make the request for cash. This was, according to him, in relation to the issue of gaining trust from the other party, which, of course, could only be done through familiarity. The phone was to remain with the sought lender and I would get it back upon repayment of the money provided. We were suddenly to hold position under one of the sheltering structures built for commuters waiting to become passengers on our arrival at the bus depot. Wait right here. I'll be back just now. Flo made the announcement as he moved away for a short distance to engage with comrades of his. He moves more quickly now than he did when he was one of the fatties in high school. I stood with his girlfriend in waiting. Smoking on cigarettes as I considered him set to handing me the advantage of a budget to afford entertainment for the night which ensued. It was conversation with his girlfriend which made the first few minutes of him having ventured away from sight skip my notice. I took stride to go look for him, leaving his girlfriend behind. Don't be gone for too long. I respond by letting her know that I'm going to be brief with my scouting. The surprise of her absence from the spot where I had left her brought about my initial suspicion of having been robbed by agreeing to a vicious plan. I waited at the same location, telling myself that he would not be foolish enough to rob someone heftier than he is and also living within close proximity to him. I've become heftier than he is now ever since he became a morphine addict. I let an hour pass. Dreams of how I was going to get back at him were rambunctiously shrouding my mind as I walked back to my neighborhood. I had my supper, then pocketed the handcuffs which used to belong to my traffic cop stepfather. A deep desire for vengeance inspired my intentions with him. With his wrists fastened, he would be rendered helpless while I damaged the bones in his body and bloodied him savagely. I had familiarity of the places he favored most for stationing himself at for getting high. He was at neither of them on that night. The show which drove me to go look for money to buy a ticket for attendance produced itself without me. The days which follow include a lot of drinking and hanging out with homies that usually organize a congregation of nilfits to complement our sittings. I had nothing better to do besides drink my weekends away after someone at home had broken the screen on the laptop I had been making musical work on. I did smoky after what I estimate to have been an hour of conversation. On my stroll, which is to lead me straight to bed, I have a young girl choosing to accompany me for a bit of a distance. She let me know that her birthday is due in 3 months. I found this to be a bit strange. 3 months left of anticipation it make it 3 months left of anticipation make it too soon a time to herald an upcoming birthday. The weirdness of it was something I attained realization of only after we had parted ways. She told me that she would be turning 16. I could only suppose that such early presentation of excitement was something not too irregular for her age. I'm rudely woken up by another high-pitched dialogue mother and her daughter are having while preparing to get to their separate schools on the first Friday of September. Shirley's a high school teacher and Vociferous last-born child is a learner at our primary school. The loud chatters of a sort which could not have them unaware that anyone sleeping in the small house is being disrupted. Plausibility of it being intentional carries weight. Shirley believes that I am a complete failure and in turn regarding me with the least respect possible is a lesson her children are continuously taught. Middle child is the least thorough learner of that lesson as he has been living with our grandmother just as I had done for my first 13 years ensuing birth. Academic results reflecting truancy had me expelled from the University of Johannesburg at the end of my freshman year. This had moved her to view me with scorn. I had enrolled to study a course referred to as corporate communication. I am still clueless as to what the rudiments of that subject are. While missing classes and enjoying time with peers on campus, I was getting high on marijuana and also consuming alcohol surprisingly early during the day. When the sun had set, maintaining intoxication was the objective I prioritized above that of studying for any upcoming test. I get up from bed pissed off by their noise. As I brush my teeth, I remember the promise I had made to walk a teenage girl to school in conversation a week before. I will only have my breakfast after attending to it. Luck could grant me the opportunity of inquiring on her plans for the weekend by first allowing us to meet again. I await her to make an exit from the house she had told me is her home. Portia is the name she introduced herself with. After waiting on luck long enough to lose my patience, I moved myself away from the street corner, which was allowing a decent view of her house to go have my morning cereal. Not having a cell phone sucks. After smoking some weed and taking a bath, I head to town to do some writing at the library for the sake of trying a different location. I do that believing it might be conducive towards productivity in the exacting task. I find a seat right next to Desiree. She's a familiar social network contact I still had not informed about the loss of my phone. My usage of the term crackhead when speaking about Flo is something she advises me to be against doing, although she has never met the imbecile. The last time I had met with her was actually also the first time, which was when I got her numbers. I am excited by the sudden opportunity to spend a bit of time with her. I waste none of it when I feel a necessity to remind her of my loathing toward mentions of her boyfriend when we conversate. I've no qualms brought about by the realization of having rationed more focus for her than I had given to the task I initially came for when the time to exit the library arrived. When are you buying a car? The question is directed at me. The upcoming task of having to walk home while bearing the lethargy induced by the day's fluster prompted her to ask this. She's a Mercedes-Benz dream, I immediately find out. Her reluctance to give me a kiss after I had inquired as to whether that was the thought she had momentarily seemed preoccupied by has us only saying goodbye with a hug. It took me less than 15 minutes to arrive at Charles's Tartrue parlor for a hangout. I find him absent from his place of business and Flo is not at the spot either. He had seemed to regularly make the decision to spend his time there on some of the days within weeks past. Charles is also a former schoolmate. When the time came to select the option for enrolling at the tertiary institution or following whatever route one deemed necessary, he opted to open the doors to his very own business. He's one of the few people who chose to be of assistance to my survival through some extremely dire straits. His grandmother let me stay at her house after he voluntarily persuaded her into doing so for the sake of making me less homeless. At the time, I had secured myself a job as a sportswear salesman. often showing up for work with a backpack containing all my clothes, as I was regularly unsure as to where I would sleep before early daylight came again. My weed smoking habit had initially brought to me the chance of an interview for the employment. It happened while I was headed for town through a street in Rustenburg North, homeless and looking to go get a job, then maybe also some clothes by doing a bit of shoplifting after having realized the simplicity of it a few days before. A fellow stoner walking in the same direction with skunk weed lit agreed to share the smoke. After a long conversation, he let me know that he managed a clothing retail store. He took the only CV I had, and after a few days, we were both getting drunk on my wage. I quit the job after continuously being overwhelmed by work which was not commensurated by its paychecks. I had already moved back home by then. 5 months had gone by since I had been kicked out on the eve of my 21st birthday. I am very glad to have conquered the obstacles brought about by that dismissal from home. Mother wasted no time in getting to speaking about the history of having kicked me out before in assembly with the parents from the yard at the back of ours on a Sunday morning. Their 15-year-old daughter made claims stating that I had sexually harassed her while she was standing in line at the nearby tuck shop during the previous night. I had been doing a lot of drinking before stumbling into her. I do not remember where, nor do I remember with whom it was I had been drinking. I can only recall playfully asking her to buy me some candy without being touchy to such extremes when doing so. None of the eyewitnesses of my interaction with her saw anything which could prove her story truthful. I did not smack her ass or squeeze her tits. She happens to be the very same girl that oddly informed me of her birthday too many weeks before the date. I am not sure at all what it is she is trying to prove with the tale she is telling. The best solution I come up with to get us all closer to adjourning the ridiculous meeting is to voice a suggestion for the kid to keep the hell away from me in future. I had actually reached the resolution of no longer being social with her like I usually had been when I had assurance of her being too young for adult curiosity. During an instance in which I had been standing in the same line as her at another tuck shop the past week, I actually did not bother to make the effort of greeting her along with any of the other people that were present there, the beginning of my deprivation of special attention unto her. She turned my way after noticing my presence. I was momentarily set out of my newly chosen disposition of paying her no attention by having to respond courteously to her greeting before I moved on ahead of the line to purchase my cigarette. During this sitting where I am supposed to bear the miserable role of a falsely accused defendant, she lies by claiming that I was actually the one who greeted her. Her mother's face shows disappointment passing in a jiffy when I prove the child to be dishonest when she agrees to my correction of her claims by stating whom it really was that first greeted whom and thus showed more intent for making the conflict. Perhaps becoming aware of my choice to be less involved with her created a fierce determination to regain our acquaintance of before with a vengeance. She has always seemed fond of maintaining a level of sociability which somewhat popularized her in our neighborhood. The meeting concludes with the child's parents opting to not press charges. I'm doubtful as to whether the magnitude of the predicament I would have been bound for was something she had realization of. I could have been in jail. I'm celebrating the commencement of my freedom with drinks at a bar, video shoot an hour later with some homies from around my block. They all rap. The video girl I tried to seduce as one of the owners of the venue we are shooting at as her boyfriend. She leaves with him after all the footage which brought us there is taken. I do not get laid. The bride we have while hanging out has me glad to be making commensal with the fellas after having skipped breakfast earlier. In my neighborhood, Flo is taking a walk with his crackhead girlfriend. I just made it to his street after being dropped off by a car after the video shoot. I let him know that it has now gone far past the deadline for him to give me what he owes. He does not search his pockets as I had suggested for him to do in case he has my belongings with him, but simply forgot due to effects from some of the drugs he had probably consumed. Instead, he tries to give some sort of explanation, but I smack him on the face midway his delivery of gibberish. He exposes the innards of his pockets and lets me know that he has nothing on him while portraying that message in gesture 2 with his hand spread to his side. I smack him with the left hand this time. He hesitates to respond with whatever is on his mind, so I smack him again. The bystanders who are familiar with him as their neighbor intervene. They drive me away from him and hold me back from furthering the assault. I get to the liquor store needing a calmer. A false notion about me wanting to hear him trying to explain why he's unprepared to hand me back what he took has him standing in front of me close enough to get himself slapped again. I am again stopped by people near the scene. This time he vanishes while I'm being kept from getting anywhere near him. My decision to go home is one I make after advice to do so was given by a friend who was also at the spot where the conflict arose. My grandma's visiting and I find her watching television in my little sister's bedroom when I arrive at the house. He's the same aunt I had been living with in Johannesburg when I was a freshman. I was baffled to hear my auntie on the other end of the line when I had made a phone call to my grandma after being confronted on suspicions of pedophile defining behavior by one of the parents from the morning. She actually took the phone from my grandma to talk to me. My aunt used to let her sexual curiosity get the better of her, with me being manipulated into playing along in the experimentation driven by her trashy fantasies. I believe it caused disgust that still affected me while we were living with each other in Johannesburg. She even requested that I penetrate her anally. Sexual grooming ensnared me quite early. I have always perceived her preference to refer to herself as my second mother as somewhat sordid. That would make me a motherfucker in the truest sense.